Hello, and welcome to Interdependent Study, our podcast where we engage in the learning and unlearning work for collective liberation. I'm Aaron.
And I'm Damien. Thank you so much for joining us today. Each week, we'll bring something new to the table and discuss our thoughts and feelings about it through the lenses of who we are and where we can go for a more just society.
We want Interdependent Study to be a space where we're always learning with one another. And Damien, you were up this week.
Yes, sir.
What do you bring to the table today?
Yeah, I'm really excited. I've brought a piece from the latest issue of In These Times to the table for us to talk about today. The piece is called I Am Not Afraid, and it was written by Adam Federman, who, as I mentioned last week when I introed this, he's a reporting fellow with Type Investigations and has had his work featured lots of places like Politico, Wired, The Washington Post, and In These Times. And this article was really great. It's all about the ways in which the current administration is targeting activists, organizers, protesters, especially folks who are engaged in that kind of work and liberation work, and or just simply speaking out in opposition to what the administration believes and is working towards as part of its agenda. And Adam explores this by using a few examples of what's been happening across the country in terms of the administration's targeting of environmental activists to the ways in which the administration and its right-wing loyalists are trolling and doxing activists, how the administration is targeting and attacking people engaged in their basic constitutionally guaranteed rights, like the freedom of speech and freedom of protest. We've seen examples of those, and he highlights them about Tesla and ICE and Doge and, support for Palestine and against the genocide that's taking place there, and so much more. And there was a quote that Adam included in this piece that I think sums up exactly what the Trump administration is doing, and I think sets the tone, or could set the tone for the conversation we're going to have, and certainly for the gravity of the situation we're in. And so I wanted to share that to kick us off. So the quote is this: "The administration is showing flagrant disregard for basic First Amendment principles and abusing the power of the government to go after perceived ideological enemies," says Brian House, a senior ACLU staff attorney and a member of Mahmoud Khalil and Rumeysa Ozturk's defense. And for me, that part about their perceived ideological enemies is huge, right? Like, we're witnessing every single day the Trump administration's efforts to silence dissent and to harm or discredit or remove people who the administration labels as other or different or the enemy. And in every single case, I feel like I could say that in every single case, it's abhorrent, it's dangerous, it's beyond troubling to and for all of us. And I think that's a big sort of takeaway from this piece for me. So there is so much in this piece. It was a long one, but it was really great. And let's get into it, my friend. Where do you want to start?
Yeah, this was such a great summary of the ways that protest is being suppressed across the country, both by vigilante groups and by the feds.
Yeah.
And I think there's a lot of fear that's represented in this article by protesters, but I think the undercurrent of fear that I felt through it that is palpable is from the ruling class.
Yeah.
It's from the Trump regime. It's from Elon and Tesla. It's from the FBI. They're all afraid of us.
Yes.
That's why they're deporting people who speak out against Israel. That's why they're trying to crack down on free speech at universities. They're afraid of us.
Yes.
Every new idea they have to crack down on protests is a new fear they have that we're winning.
Yeah.
And also, they're all recycled old ideas that they don't have a new one in the book. It's just all old stuff that they're doing all over again. They borrowed from racist, violent regimes throughout history.
Yes.
So while there is a lot of fear from protesters and people who are on the freedom side, and rightly so,
Right.
I think there's a lot more fear from the fascists of us, of the people on the freedom side. That was one of the undercurrents
I like
that I
that.
read through it.
I like that.
Is every single time you see this, where they're cracking down, or they're trying to do this, or they're trying to do that, it's because they're afraid of what a world looks like that we win.
Yeah. And we continue to stand up against them, right? And what's been going on. I love that. I think that's absolutely true. And, I think you're right. There's so much in the stories that he shares of the people mentioned that obviously there's fear there, and there's a lot going on to to stand up to the government and to do this kind of work. But I really love that analysis and that thought about what's happening on the other side and what's fueling it. I love that. One of the most worrisome things, and it's crazy to say that, just one that's happening right now that Adam highlights in this piece is just how wide-ranging and honestly insane the Trump administration's behaviors and actions are as it relates to silencing dissent and threatening all of us. And again, I really mean all of us. So Adam says in the piece, quote, Jeff Fuhrer, an attorney with the National Lawyers Guild who has represented climate activists and protesters for 35 years, including some of the Boston area activists recently questioned by the FBI, says he's never seen the agency engage in this kind of behavior with his clients, targeting individuals who either have no criminal record or who are not accused of committing a crime or in federal property. I think this is part of a campaign to suppress dissent, Fuhrer says. The FBI, just like the Justice Department, just like ICE and DHS, is being used as a weapon by the Trump administration to solidify his power and to advance the agenda of the administration. You know, there's so much that the Trump administration is doing that's really awful. Mm-hmm. But the fact that innocent people and people with no criminal record, people not accused or connected to a crime at all, are being targeted by this administration, being arrested by this administration, is really outlandish and beyond wrong. And it, you know, you talk about fear. I feel like it's a tactic to scare us, and it is absolutely scary to think I might step outside into a protest and be arrested. But I think what it should do and what it does for me is incite us to fight like hell. I mean, it's just, you know, the more I think the more we can fight this and we stand in solidarity with one another and do this work, you know, we'll get there. We will get there. But the fear is absolutely there.
Yeah. And I think ultimately the fear can be overwhelming. Yeah. And the thing that I try to hold on to is that there are more of us than there are of them.
Yes.
And that gives me hope.
Yeah, absolutely. Right?
So,
absolutely.
Oh, early on in this article, they talk about Nathan Phillips, who is a professor at Boston University, and he helped lead protests at a Tesla dealership, which then led to nationwide protests. Yes. And because of his effectiveness, he was targeted. The article says, quote, Phillips was doxxed by MAGA trolls who falsely claimed he had threatened Musk and has ties to Act Blue, the Democratic fundraising behemoth that has become a target of the Trump administration. And the article goes on to say that he was hanging posters in his office, and those would be repeatedly removed by other university employees when he wasn't there. And the fascinating thing to me in this is about Act Blue, which has become this lightning rod for accusing protesters of being funded by what Elon Musk calls a left-wing NGO cabal. They're making stuff up based on very limited understanding of how anything works because they know it will stick. And I think they know it will lead to investigation by the arms of the Justice Department that are Trump controlled. Right. And or it'll lead to these groups and people being targeted by vigilante groups. And so we saw evidence of that in this article where people were sending emails to organizations with just a single person's physical address. Yeah. Or finding other ways to sort of threaten them without threatening them. Yes. And just the fear that incites is, I think, it's very visceral. Yeah. That fear.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And I particularly love what you said there at the end about the Justice Department because it's Trump controlled. And so there's so much of the government that it has succumbed to this fascist regime and that is controlled by it. And that, again, speaking of fear, I think it makes it all the more scary as an entity, as this thing that we're fighting against. One of the things that Adam talks about in this piece that's, I think, been particularly disheartening and sad to witness is the work of ICE and the mass deportations that the Trump administration has been carrying out. I mean, ICE is everywhere. It's in almost all of our communities at this point. I think we've all probably seen those kinds of stories be published. So here's just a snippet of what Adam shares in this piece. Quote, the targeting of international students is happening against the backdrop of frightening developments in Trump's broader mass deportation campaign. The administration has renditioned more than 200 Venezuelan immigrants to a notorious Salvadorian mega prison known, according to Human Rights Watch, for its use of torture, ill treatment, incommunicado detention, and inhumane conditions. It has also openly defied multiple court orders, including a unanimous Supreme Court ruling demanding the return of one of those immigrants, Kilmore Abrego Garcia, whom government officials admit was mistakenly deported. Meanwhile, Trump has publicly speculated about the legality of sending U.S. citizens to foreign prisons and has repeatedly said, most recently in an interview with NBC News, that he doesn't know whether he needs to uphold the Constitution. And Stephen Miller, his deputy chief of staff, has said that this administration is considering the extreme measure of suspending the writ of habeas corpus, essentially stripping citizens and non-citizens of basic constitutional protections, which only Congress has the power to do. And there's so much in there, right? From what happened and is happening to Mr. Garcia, to, what we've learned about these awful detention facilities, to the treatment of international students on our college and university campuses. But I think most egregiously is the blatant disregard for and of the duties of the president and the office of the president and the oath that that person is supposed to swear, and the blatant disregard for the law. And it's sad, it's sickening, it's wrong. It's wrong on levels we've never experienced before, and in many ways. And again, that I keep coming back. I've been so moved by your use of fear, right? For me, it brings that up every single time when I think about it.
Yeah, it's also funny because it's so stupid.
Yeah.
It's so stupid. So much of this is so fear-inducing, but also just stupid.
Yeah.
Like accusing Act Blue of whatever it is that they're accusing Act Blue of, accusing or denying that I have to uphold the Constitution, even though it's the first real thing.
Right.
As President of the United States, I will uphold. I think it's
the
verbatim
thing.
in
it is the oath. Yeah.
That is broadcast to everybody, and it's just so stupid. And then on top of that, you see the video of Kristi Noem having no idea what habeas corpus is and what it means as a centuries-old legal standard is chilling.
Yeah.
It's chillingly stupid.
Yeah.
Is what it is. So, yeah, it's bizarre. We live in a bizarre world.
Yeah.
And we see these kinds of procedural attacks in the context of repression of speech and protest, as this whole article is about. So Adam says, quote, "These government pressure tactics work hand in hand with far-right internet campaigns intended not only to inundate activists and their supporters with targeted harassment and death threats, but to frame organizers and their movements as directly responsible for isolated crimes committed during large protests, as a way to deprive them of funding and institutional support, and ultimately to silence them."
Yes.
And it's a way to combine right-wing vigilante attacks with the official force of the federal government to make people afraid in as many realms of their life as possible. It's not just that some FBI agent might show up at your door. It's also that you might get doxxed.
Yep.
And some heavily armed right-wing vigilante might show up at your door.
Right.
And then even further, you might not be able to tell the difference between the two.
Yes.
And so you don't know who it is who's at your door and what rights you have and what you don't have and what they're going to do or what their limits are or what they even believe their limits to be.
Absolutely.
All of that is all at play.
Yeah.
And it's very strange and also scary.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you talk about showing up at your door. I mean, that we can broaden that. I mean, it could be your home door. It could be your office door. It could be your school door. It could be your mosque door. It could be out in the streets, in broad daylight.
Outside of the grocery store, outside of whatever errand you're running. It's all over.
It's all over. Yeah. So I think, again, there's so much in this piece that he highlights, and it makes it such a powerful cover story for their latest issue. But I want to switch gears here and shift our conversation over to application. How does this piece and our conversation about it apply to our everyday lives and work? I want to dive into the story you started to share a little bit earlier. Adam shares a quote from that university professor that you mentioned earlier, because I think it resonates. His quote resonates with everything we talk about on this podcast.
Yeah.
And I know I can speak for you when I say this, like we both believe in this deeply. And so Adam wrote, quote, "In many cases, universities are preemptively policing speech on Palestine to avoid being penalized by the administration or drawing undue attention to their institution." On March 13th, 5 days after Mahmoud Khalil was detained, Boston University professor Nathan Phillips posted a sign in his office window expressing solidarity with the Syrian-born Palestinian activist. When Phillips returned to teach the following week, the sign had been removed. Over the next month, Phillips engaged in a cat-and-mouse game with the administration, wherein he repeatedly put up new signs, including one supporting Ozturk and one for Mohsen Madawi, another international Columbia student detained by ICE, and the university took them all down. On April 15th, Phillips began a hunger strike until federal authorities released Khalil and Ozturk, explaining to End These Times and Type Investigation via text message, quote, "I am taking this action because none of us are free until they are free." And it's that last part, right? No one is free until we're all free, and full stop. And if we continue to let these things happen and allow these things to happen, I'm really worried about what it will mean for all of us.
Yeah, amen to all of that, because none of us are free if all of us aren't.
Right. Absolutely.
And as Dr. King said, a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Yes.
I think that's how he said it, but paraphrasing, at least that's what he meant. Yeah, my application ties into that. I think that phrase is one of the reasons why this is happening. It's all connected to trying to control us, and they're afraid of us coming together because it's easier for us to subvert their control when we're united.
Yes.
We see that in the resistance to abductions across the country, from people sitting down in front of ICE vehicles to shouting and shaming ICE officials to their face, and a lot of other ways that people are resisting the things that are happening. Know Your Rights workshops and all kinds of stuff like that is happening across the country. And they're afraid of us coming together because they know it undermines their power and their access to power and the continued ability to control us all and line their pockets and their friends' pockets with money.
And wield that power, right, in ways that are unchecked and unhinged. Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. All right, some connected application there is great. Let's move on to homework. How do we want to continue our learning and unlearning work once we leave the table today? I definitely want to check out the other articles in this latest issue of In These Times. This piece was really great, obviously, and so I want to see what else they've published recently. I took a look, and there's one piece about the role of day laborers in the aftermath of climate disasters, which we seem to be having more and more of here lately. And there's another one about queer organizers and their efforts to rally and mobilize for Palestinians and against the genocide that's taking place there. And both of those pieces, from the brief review of them that I did, sounded really great. And just a couple of examples of all the great articles in the latest issue. So, what about you?
Nice. Yeah, I want to read Rumeysa Ozturk's statement that she filed in the courts in Vermont that details what she experienced while in custody with ICE. And an important part here to note is that she didn't know that she was being arrested by government officials at first and thought she was being kidnapped by vigilante groups that had been targeting her. So that's why I said that piece about you don't know who it is who's at your door or outside the grocery store. She was taken off of the streets outside of her home as she was going to break fast with friends. And so, I think reading people's accounts of what's happening, both on our own soil in Louisiana or wherever ICE has their detention facilities, Alligator Alcatraz, or, I actually don't like to call it that because I think that's just marketing propaganda for them. And anyway, so what's happening here in our country, but also what's happening in El Salvador and other places around the world that we're sending people.
Absolutely.
And what are their experiences there? And they've been pretty harrowing from what I've seen so far.
Absolutely. Incredible point. Yes. Well, that's our conversation about this incredible piece. Definitely check it out, folks, if you are interested. Aaron, you're up next time.
Yes.
What are you bringing to the table in our next episode?
I'm bringing an article from the Center for American Progress called 10 Egregious Things You May Not Know About the One Big Beautiful Bill Act. So the subtitle of it says, I think all we need to know about the article, so that's what I'll say.
Okay.
So it says, quote, Congressional Republicans' radical budget and tax bill includes several less known provisions that will increase costs, fuel the Trump administration's overreach, and waste taxpayer dollars.
Oh, joy.
Oh, joy. So I think it felt important to learn a little bit more about what's coming down the pike from this legislation, most of which won't go into effect until maybe later this year or next year after the midterms, which they have planned strategically for all of the immoral, stupid electoral reasons that they have done that. So yeah, we'll read that, talk about it next week, and learn more about this heinous piece of legislation that has become law.
It has become law. Absolutely. Yeah, I'm excited to read that. Very good. All right. Well, with that, folks, we want to thank you for joining us today. You know what we want you to do here, but in case you forgot, please follow, leave a rating and review, share our podcast with the people in your life. Follow us on social media, including Instagram, TikTok, and Blue Sky. Check us out on YouTube and sign up and join us on Patreon to get notified about any new things we've got going on behind the scenes.
Yes, thank you so much for listening. And remember, it's not about us, but it is about all of us. And we'll talk to you next week.